the destruction of the intellectual. The obsession with the seen and the neglect of the invisible and the abstract is related to the tragic decline of the intellectual in society. This process was pushed forward by wealthy ideologues seeking to defend their power, such as the Scaffi family, the Koch family, and the Coors family. They paid top dollar to create and to circulate narratives in the media that suggested that business administration and marketing were practical and fundamental because they created wealth. They paid newspapers to repeat and repeat that the intellectuals who tried to understand the fundamentals of the university, of the universe, and of society, the intellectuals devoted to morality and ethics, are impractical and elitist. The exploitation of nature or of fellow humans, the manipulation of currency and capital by investors, was lauded by this new group of gurus that these groups funded. And then that argument was fed to us through the commercial media. The criminals who made wealth out of nothing through financial fraud, like Elon Musk, Warren Buffett, and Bill Gates, are presented to us as icons for genuflection. Thus, an enormous number of Americans were convinced to pursue careers in business, and they dedicated themselves to the proposition that their fellow men should be objects for exploitation, that the principle in all interactions is competition rather than cooperation. If you do a search online for a job, you will find today that the only jobs available are in exploitative fields that promote consumption and value growth over values or understanding. Even the careers possible at NGOs with important missions require that one beg ruthless businessmen for funding to keep going. The decline of the role of the intellectual in a society controlled by corporations did not lead academics to build bridges to the working people or to find solidarity with the impoverished. Quite the opposite. Rather, intellectuals sought refuge in an even more narcissistic, even more elitist institutional culture, one that alienates workers and allowed for the discontent to turn rather to the far right for vision. The commercialization of the university. The degradation of the intellectual is part and parcel of the commercialization of the university over the past 2 decades. Institutions that once promoted intellectual inquiry have devolved into top-heavy academic bureaucracies focused on rewarding deans and provosts with high salaries and serving the corporate clients that have replaced government as sources for funding. More often than not, the top decision makers are not even academics, but MBAs and accountants who consider research and education a service, the equivalent of supplying broadband to the consumer, and not a moral goal. The professor, likewise, has become a day laborer subject to market forces whose value is determined by his or her popularity with students. The funds that he or she raises from corporations, and his or her ability to publish in specialized journals that have a very low tolerance for originality. The administrators, responding to market forces, compel these professors to write in an obscure language inaccessible to anyone who has not attended graduate school, so that they can publish in journals that few will ever read. Professors who do not write for those academic journals cannot keep their jobs. To top it off, these journals are inaccessible to the citizen and will never show up in a Google search. Paywall services like JSTOR, a cover for parasitic corporations that make money off of the labor of others, charge enormous fees for access to research that was funded with your tax dollars. When the American programmer Aaron Swartz, founder of Creative Commons, released to the public JSTOR articles based on research funded by tax dollars, he paid for that act with his life. Course offerings at the university have been cut back because supposedly students are no longer interested in the humanities or in the arts. The fact that the decisions of corporations not to hire those with a background in the humanities is not an economic reality, but rather an explicit political act, and this fact is never mentioned. The promotion by corporations of a shallow, materialistic culture in the media that discourages interest in literature, in art and music is considered to be a fact of life, not a criminal conspiracy to dumb down citizens. The media tells us that democracy is critical, but a society without ethically committed intellectuals, without institutions that can support those intellectuals and artists, is like a body without bones. No degree of elections or heated media debates can save such a doomed society. The ideological commitment to public service and to self-sacrifice on the part of intellectuals has vanished. Corporations and banks have pressured institutions and universities, museums and theaters, as well as government and corporate overpaid executives to marginalize and to demean the intellectual, the artist, and the writer in those institutions that were meant to support them. When Drew Faust retired as president of Harvard in 2018, she was immediately welcomed to join the board of Goldman Sachs, the investment bank. Such a blatant conflict of interest would have been unthinkable 20 years ago. Harvard, once famous for its research and its teaching, is now prized primarily by investment banks for its $50 billion endowment. The brand value of Harvard has value for corporations who find strategic alliances with select professors helpful for pushing their evil agendas on the American people. The corporate takeover of academics was fatal for science. As Mark Edwards and Siddhartha Roy detail in their article, Academic Research in the 21st Century, Maintaining Scientific Integrity in a Climate of Perverse Incentives and Hyper-Competition, truth does not hold a candle to profit maximization in science today. Professors are hired and fired on the basis of quantitative performance metrics. Quantitative performance metrics. Publication count, citations, combined citation publication counts, i.e. H-index, journal impact factors, total research dollars, and total patents. Seemingly scientific, this dark alchemy has little or nothing to do with the search for truth. The increase in direct or indirect corporate funding has led to a number of taboo topics for research in academics. The privatization and militarization of space and the Arctic, the takeover of government functions by multinational banks, or the corruption of academics is a topic untouched. Intellectuals cannot discuss these topics unless they are ready to be exiled to the margins, to have their writings labeled as alternative or as conspiracy theories.